I wasn't really actively like discovering, you know. I think as a little kid, I was just turned on by what I heard on the radio, and mostly Rediffusion, because I grew up listening to Rediffusion, and that was a time when Rediffusion was the only truly progressive pop music station, because there was no really like 24-hour pop on the radio. I think that's something we now take for granted. But back then there was really no pop station. We only had Radio 1, and Radio 1 was operated like BBC Radio, mostly like 70% magazine programs and 30% pop music, you know. So I discovered the music scene here only when I started a band and became more aware of the chances of performing and where I could perform. That's when I kind of realized what the scene was about. Because basically I was just, you know, a music fan. I wouldn't care about the scene here. And then sadly, I think I was aware that in the 60s there was a lot of happening music, because I switched on the radio, you hear a lot of local bands, but by the 70s all that was gone because of the stringent regulations and government agenda. So the music kind of died, basically. And to me, I would say it was marked by the advent of Woodstock, the whole flower power revolution. I think that really scared off our government. So I would say that what I considered Singapore to be the dark ages started from 1969 onwards, when Woodstock happened. So that was when the big clampdown happened, clubs were closed, and radio was not allowed to play amplified blues rock music, which was the music of its day back then. And then you wouldn't see anything on television either, you know. So but mainly it's because I started playing music towards the end of the 70s, when I was invited by Damien Sin to be in his band called Transformer. Well, you know, no, there was a real clampdown. There was actually very, very little chance for so-called indie bands or bands playing original music to thrive. Actually, there were no places, you know. National Theatre had a rule that they could not perform rock concerts there. But there was a little loophole, and that was there were people who organized charity concerts. So they had a lot of charity concerts in the National Theatre, and they happened to be rock music. So that was the loophole. Other than that, there were really no venues. I remembered even like in the late 70s, early 80s, when the band I was in, Transformer, was hoping to have a platform, a stage. We used to hang out in the bars along Orchard Road and waited for the resident band to take a break, and then we'd volunteer to play 10 minutes, you know, and felt it was like, oh, thank God. Yeah, so there were no venues at all, none. Of course it was hard, because the culture of original music, original Singapore English pop bands had died. I mean, you have to remember that back in the 70s, the famous pop artists of the time were people like Anita Sarawak and Tracy Huang. They were your two biggest selling acts, basically. There were hardly any really like adventurous rock bands, apart from maybe a couple of them, like Western Union Band, Fly Bass, that were recorded. There were bands that were not recorded, like Pest Infested. There were some other, but those were considered to be more your underground blues rock band, you know, that had no commercial value. Because after all, radio was not allowed to play that kind of music. So the whole sensibility of people appreciating local music and local artists were gone, were wiped out. We were actually just doing it for the love and inspiration of punk, basically. You know, we were hoping against all odds that we'll get somewhere. But by the look of things, it wasn't going to get anywhere anyway. I mean, they didn't even have the right kind of producer or engineer or studio to accommodate the Zircon Lounge Regal Vigor album. I remembered when we went in, we had to bring in our own snare drum, because they had put in sacks of sand inside the snare drum to soften the sound of the snare drum, because it was meant to have the Tracy Huang sound. Drums cannot be cracklingly loud, no. And I remember when we kept telling the engineer, turn up the sound of the guitar, he was like, it's already maximum, like that. And we used to laugh about it. But that was really how it was. It was not easy. I mean, but that's why the Zircon Lounge Regal Figure album sounded so murky and so, in a sense, not what we wanted, because there really was no experience in that field to record music of our nature. We were the very first, you know. Yeah, back then in the West, you had the whole punk explosion, you had the Romeo Void, the REM and the U2, but in Singapore all that didn't happen, you know. People didn't know all that music. People were just still listening to, at most, Deep Purple, Grand Funk, you know, that sort of thing. They didn't know the whole punk new wave sensibility at all. That was frowned upon, in fact. I think, in a sense, you have to really, really credit Mr. Jimmy Wee in a super big way. Without Jimmy Wee, there would have been no Dick Lee phenomenon. There would have been no Jacinta, there would have been no Lizards Convention, there would have been no Humpback Oak first album. There were so many things that Jimmy believed in, because all he really wanted was local music to be heard. And he really put his money where his heart was, you know, to release these albums by local bands at a time when it was considered foolish and stupid and completely impractical to release them, because there was no market. But he believed in it. So it always goes back down to that one person who believed in it. In the same way that I'm proud to say that back when at Rediffusion, I was the only person who believed in punk music. Okay, there was also Gail Chin, but she left. And I was the only one. So because of that, I pushed for the music on Rediffusion. And people don't know this, but I got into a whole lot of trouble as well. It always goes back down to whoever believes in it, and the person happens to be in a position to do something. I think that's the most important thing. You know, it's like Little, who believes in this exhibition, so he starts it, he forms it, he organizes it. So, I mean, maybe someone else would do it, but then, you know, it's important that somebody is there to provide that platform. And Jimmy Wee really was the guy. You easily can say he was the local music entrepreneur of Singapore, and should be acknowledged as a huge founding father of the music scene. Without him, all the music that you heard in the 70s and 80s would not have existed, even in the 90s.